In this lesson, we're going to be defining and working with absolute value. What is absolute value? It is equal to the distance from the origin, which is 0, on a number line. So we're talking about distance. The symbol that we use for absolute value looks like this, where you're going to take the absolute value of some number. An absolute value is an operation, just like adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. So we're going to perform that operation. It's going to do something, and it's basically going to talk about distance. So, for example, what is the absolute value of 5? So let's look at it as a number line. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if that's 5, and we're talking about what is the distance from here to here, that distance is 5. So the absolute value is 5. So then what would be the absolute value of negative 5? Exact same concept. We're going to go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be negative 5. So what is the distance from here to here? Also, we're talking about a distance, so the direction does not matter. So the distance from negative 5 to 0 is 5. So notice that the absolute value of 5 stays as a positive 5, but the absolute value of negative 5 turns into a positive 5 because it's a distance. So everything will become positive. So what about absolute value of 0? Well, same idea with a number line. How far away is 0 from 0? 0. So everything will become 0 or positive. That's what absolute value will do when you actually perform the absolute value. So let's work through a couple problems that deals with absolute value. So directions may say simplify. And if we have the absolute value of negative 3 minus the absolute value of 3, so absolute value of negative 9 minus the absolute value of 3. So let's perform the operations. So we can't subtract them quite yet because order of operations, we have to deal, parentheses are kind of like, absolute value is kind of like parentheses. We have to work on the inside first. So the absolute value of negative 9 is positive 9. That has nothing to do with the absolute value, so we'll just bring that down. The absolute value of 3 is 3, and 9 minus 3 will turn out to be 6. All right, let's do another one. So what if instead you had a negative 9 minus 3 and they were inside the absolute values? So some people mistake this for changing everything to positive before we add or subtract everything. It's order of operations. So we need to perform this operation first, and then the absolute value is going to be applied to only that single value that's left over. So negative 9 minus 3, some people like it if you add the opposite. So negative 9 plus a negative 3 is a negative 12. Now we'll perform the absolute value and make it a positive 12. All right, so what if you have a negative 20? It has to perform the absolute value. So this is really the only way that you can get a negative value out of it, because the absolute value, and it's not because you're doing the absolute value of a negative, the absolute value of a negative is positive, so that's a 20. That negative is after you perform the absolute value, so it just kind of gets tacked on at the end. So that's a negative 20. All right. So let's try another one. What if it's the absolute value of negative 10 minus the absolute value of negative 8? So very similar to the first one that we did. The absolute value of negative 10 is positive 10. We bring down the sign. Absolute value of negative 8 is positive 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. All right, what if you have a negative absolute value of negative 10 minus the absolute value of negative 8? So we take a similar problem to this, but we throw in another negative in the front of it. Is it going to give you the same value? So let's walk through it. The absolute value of negative 10 is 10. This was on the outside, so we'll just bring it down. We'll bring that subtraction down. The absolute value of negative 8 is 8. And And now we're going to do negative 10 minus 8. I like to add the opposite. Negative 10 plus a negative 8 makes negative 18. One more. So what if you have negative 2 times the absolute value of 5 minus 3 minus 3 times the absolute value of negative 2 minus 1. Alright, so we got a lot going on. Order of operations. Essentially you have parentheses here, and then we'll perform the absolute value after that. Same situation here. So 5 minus 3 will get us a 2. We have not done the absolute value yet. We have not performed that operation, so that absolute values will come down. The negative 2 will come down. And then the absolute value, we're going to do negative 2 minus 1, which again, I like to add the opposite. So that becomes negative 3. But we have not done the absolute value. Keep those there. That minus 3 will come down as well. And now we will finish it. So the absolute value of 2 is 2. And these are going to be multiplied together. So to separate that, I can use a dot, or I prefer to put parentheses there to kind of make it a little more obvious that they're separated. And then we'll do the same thing here. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3. Bring down that term. And so we have multiplication, multiplication. So negative 2 times positive 2 is negative 4. It's a negative 3 times a positive 3, so that's negative 9. And now we can add these two together, add the opposite, get us a negative 13. All right, and that's defining and working a little bit with some absolute values.